Well, thank you everybody for joining us on Sunday, 21st November 2021 for another session on Global Technopolitics Forum's research team. So last week, again, we were busy with some of the projects we have been working on. We have been trying to re-strategize the organization, as I mentioned. Greg, would you like to mention anything on that front?
We've been thinking about about obviously next products, and there we're working on both a major China white paper, which we talked about, and then we're also starting some work on encryption, which seems like an increasingly important topic, one I've lived through several episodes of, and we'll do that. Then we were thinking next about launching we wanted to launch a webinar series for some time, and have started thinking about who we would like to have on that. I think we've talked about that some here. Our instinct is there are too many panels out there with 4 or 5 participants where you feel like you just hear the skim across the treetops, and we'd like to do something deeper. So that means fewer people, I think, sometimes maybe just a conversation with a single person. But needless to say, we'd welcome any thoughts, suggestions, people, targets of opportunity for that series. I'd like to get that started, I think, early in the new year. And then we've also been thinking about what is our ultimate goal, and that is to do some convenings, trying to bring the right set of people in the room together, not just to have good conversation, but to come up with something that might actually be actionable. And we'd like to move those around. Part of you may want to say a word more about those. That's been our kind of ultimate ambition for the forum, is to get to the point where we can do those. If we can do in places like Silicon Valley, New York, here, London, maybe somewhere in Asia, maybe India put on. But the idea there would be to have not just a good conversation, but to have the right stakeholders in the room and come out of that conversation with, we'd hope, something actionable to do. Those are the kind of things on our mind, and we talked about many of them. Needless to say, thoughts, suggestions, comments on any of them are more than welcome.
Mm-hmm. And if I may add, in terms of the convenings, for 2022, I think we will focus on Europe and United States, and then 2023, we could expand beyond.
Right.
That's the way we are thinking at the moment, but we will sort of be flexible. We can, change these thoughts. The other area that I like to discuss is China's authoritarian. Greg mentioned that we're writing this major paper on China. And one area is that how China uses technology, or techno-authoritarian aspects of China, how it influences internal stability, both positive and negative, and how, so I think technology is kind of a double-edged thing in China. So we want to look at it from both sides, and also in terms of the influence it has on global community and on the lifestyles, or actually ideological progress globally. So that's an area that would be good. Any comments on that area is welcomed. So I want to start with Paul. Paul, any comment about any of these topics that we discussed?
Yeah, so just maybe a few updates and a thought or two. So I have uploaded a couple of documents to the China folder that I came across that I thought might be of some interest. Second thing is, I don't know, I came across reference recently to a document that had been produced within the government. I don't know if it's been shared externally or it's public. I didn't find any other reference to it, but it was like this sort of war and peace on the government's thoughts about China at the moment and where things are going. Hopefully more peace than war, but I don't know if anyone's heard about this, or there's any way of getting a closer look or access to it. It's like 600 or 700 pages. And then on the third issue was the Korea series, the seminars that were under discussion. And I've shared the document, Pari, that you provided to me which was perfect. That I shared it with a few contacts that I have in Korea, and one of them, who's a professor, is sharing that with other people that he knows. So I'll let you know if I hear back from him about additional interest. The other contact that I have, I haven't heard back from him, so I'll probably send him an email over the next couple of days to remind him. And then finally, as a last thought, maybe on the topics at issue, I think I heard the focus for the upcoming year more on the US and Europe, but then there's still sort of the ongoing focus on China. I guess my take on all this is, and maybe Greg, that's where you were headed with your comments, was sort of a little bit of a narrower focus than trying to solve world hunger, but focus on something that's a little bit deeper than sort of platitudes and superficial comments, that cover a broad range of things, but never really reach any useful conclusions. I think that's what you were saying, or that's what we should be thinking about.
No, exactly. My case in point is kind of Section 230, about which there's lots of heat and not much light. It seems to me everybody knows they don't like it, but exactly what to do about it hasn't been, there's not much good discussion of that out there. So that's kind of my example of one where I'd like to narrow down to a place where we may actually be able to make some useful, actionable suggestions.
Okay. Just as a topic, maybe for consideration, and this isn't defined at all, it would have to be probably narrowed a bit even there, but sort of gotten interested in what's going on with biotech, but specifically synthetic biology. And you could make a case this is a crossover of technology, of geopolitics, of science, so sort of the areas that the forum's been looking at. But I think there are a lot of interesting developments that are going on there that bear closer attention. And then there's this whole issue of space and outer space and what's going on there. So not necessarily thinking about a specific region or country, but this affects a lot of different actors in a lot of different countries. And there too, there's sort of a crossover with science, technology, some new thoughts about things that you'll be able to do with science specifically in outer space because of the zero gravity, as one example of that you couldn't necessarily do on Earth, or it's very costly to be able to perform the same experiments. So you're taking advantage of the unique conditions in outer space that allow you to do experiments much more cheaply, and in some cases much more accurately than they could be done on planet Earth. So anyway, just sort of an emerging area that I thought was quite interesting. And that once again, I think we could see some alignment with the ambitions and goals of the forum.
Thank you.
I haven't thought further than that, but just as a general starting point, maybe food for a little bit of additional thought, and maybe I can, if it makes sense or those areas seem of interest, try to narrow down a little bit further what something could be, or if a potential focus could be. Sorry, I've gone on a little bit too long, but I'll stop there.
No, that's actually very helpful. Thank you very much, Paul. And do you have any comment on technology in terms of authoritarian tech in China, impact on stability in China and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, there too, it's another sort of big area, and it's got a lot of attention. I'd almost wonder if because there's a lot of talk about how technology has been wielded by the government in China to create stability, which is what they're after. But I'm wondering if there are cases where the technology is being applied in such a way that it actually has been creating some areas of instability. And that, we tend to sort of focus on where the light is shining brightest, and that, we'd say our starting point always is authoritarian regime. The implication is that these guys control everything, that they have control over all the information. They've got control over all the technology, but it just ain't so. I mean, the Chinese government, as I always say, they're just as bureaucratic as any other government. And there's no way that they can be so efficient and effective at applying everything that they say they're applying. So I'm sort of curious about these cases where there's some gaps in the narrative, and where, in fact, despite their best intentions and plans, they've screwed up, and there are cases where there's instability that's been created. I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but if you think about the one child, one family policy, another scheme cooked up by the government to solve demographic problems, but now it's had just the opposite effect. And now they're, struggling to figure out what they're going to do with demographic decline. and what that impact is going to have in the longer term, economic development of the country. So can we find similar, the cracks between the tiles there that say, well, actually, the government has sort of, miscalculated. And there have been cases now where, in fact, the technology and their application of technology has actually created instability that they're having a tough time reining in or getting a handle on.
Yeah, actually, that's what we're looking for, Paul.
Absolutely.
And if any kind of sources, any references, anything that comes to your mind, any ways of digging into these things comes to your mind, let us know, because that's the area. When I said positive and negative, that's what I meant,
Yeah.
what works for them and what works against them, because that's quite important. So one area, Eduardo, any comment from you?
Yeah, very interesting. I like the new strategy and the new focus, particularly on reaching out to other areas of the world like Asia and Europe. And I have some contacts both in Europe and in Korea that perhaps I can help out with. I also like the idea of having more kind of focus group conversations with one individual, maybe as a kind of like interview format where instead of the dispersive panel approach, which I agree, Greg, it does tend to skim the surface, not only in terms of content, but also in terms of I think like depth of the theoretical aspects. And even I've noticed that this tendency of having panel type conversations on Zoom, it also tends to be a little bit cautious when it comes to like really hitting the issues head on, because nobody wants to kind of step on anybody else's toes. So I like that idea of having like one speaker, maybe an interview with that person. I wonder, however, will this all be always on Zoom? And will there ever be a moment in which maybe something can happen in person? And maybe this is just me kind of being sick of doing everything online all the time.
I'm sorry, Greg, could you let Jennifer in? She's texting me saying she's in waiting room, not able to join.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I see her here. My fault.
Okay. I'm sorry, Eduardo, for interrupting you. Please continue.
Sure. No worries. Yeah. And so I just wanted to wrap up with maybe a thought. And it came up as we were speaking. Maybe we can have something in person through connecting with various conferences and professional organizations that are starting to have meetings in person again. Like, I don't know, for example, international studies associations. And when they have their conference, I know that maybe they sometimes have subgroups, and perhaps we could utilize that as a vehicle, not only where we could travel to. I know I can travel if I can get institutional funding, but maybe some of the people that we're trying to reach out to will also either be there already, or maybe they can also travel there with institutional funding, so that we add an in-person touch to the barrage of Zoom calls that we're having.
Right. Well, that sounds good. Yes. Well, things are starting to open up, and in-person meetings are starting to happen. So that'd be great.
Yeah. And I think we could have hybrid meetings. Many places that I'm a member, we have right now hybrid meetings, which works well as well. So Puran, any comment from you?
Thank you, Pari. I think the idea which Greg mentioned is a very welcome idea. And I think while you're thinking about Europe and other places, I think Asia and Africa cannot be left. And if they are being left, they will be at our own disadvantage, because we cannot really decouple or de-link what is happening in Europe, because Europe is looking at China policy, for example. And China policy in Europe cannot be decoupled from what are the kind of thoughts which are going on both in Africa and also in Asia. I mean, Secretary of State is in Africa now, trying to offer an alternative model of developmental cooperation to many of the African countries, not to sort of prove a point that US is very keen on that, but they're trying to sort of stop China from doing what Chinese have been doing in Africa. So I think it would be a very good idea to sort of see in whatever way it is possible to also consider Asia and Africa while you are focusing on Europe and elsewhere. And to that extent, I would be very happy, as Greg said. One of the things is, I mean, Zoom could be something which may not be, always a great idea for private conversation. But I think it is always a good idea to have some conversation with the right people. For example, can we really find out, and I'll be very happy to find out some diplomats Indian diplomats who have spent a lot of time in Europe and US and elsewhere. They'd be happy to sort of come on Zoom and have some kind of a directed or controlled conversation. But having a conversation starting off is a good idea than, be concerned about anything else. And later on, as we build bridges, as we build relations with the right people, we could probably, have other things to moving on. So I'll be very happy to find one or two senior diplomats who are no longer in service, and I'll be very happy to sort of have one-on-one conversation either with you, Pari, or Greg, you, or any one of, our colleagues. So this is a part one. Part two is about Korea thing. I've been able to establish connection with director of Seoul National University, which also has an Asia Center. And they have been doing a lot of research on China, on Japan, on India, and elsewhere. And they have said they'll be pretty happy to figure out what is it, which forum is trying to do, and where could they really come in and, in some kind of a supportive role. So Seoul National University's Asia Center would be happy and keen to, explore the possibility of supporting the forum in whatever way they can. So this is the part two. And the part three is that at my end, Pari, I have been able to write to all the contacts which I had sent to you. And I'm trying to sort of talk to them and prepare the ground. And then I sort of write a connecting mail to you and these people, and then you can take it on from there on. So that's my limited sort of intervention for many of these upcoming conferences and Zoom meetings, which the forum might be looking ahead to do. So that's something from my side.
Thank you very much. That's a lot. Thank you. Yes, Greg, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No. I was going to say I was going to say that. That's good. All sounds good.
Yeah. And Jennifer, I know you joined us a bit late, so I don't know if you got the ideas, but generally we are thinking about re-strategizing the forum's approaches in various dimensions. So the comments from Paul, Eduardo, and Puram was in relation to webinars, convenings, and some of the projects we have. So I don't know how much of it you heard, but any comments in any area from you? Welcome.
Yeah, I heard from like going hybrid on. I would love to know a bit more about like what the purpose of like these meetings are going to be and what the real focus is, if it's like education of like non-members of the forum, or if it's more of a conversation of like a learning situation. I don't know, just like what the goal is of these events.
I think for webinars, we really have two goals. One is we want to have an interesting conversation about an important topic that is very much relevant to the forum. And then we'd also like to use them to expand the forum's brand a bit, to get it better known, more known out there. So I think of these as both kind of substantive first, but also outreach is important as well.
Okay.
So is there any projects, anything, Jennifer, you would like to mention that you have been working on? Or
I have not been working on anything, because I know that we talked about transitioning all the China research into a white paper, but I don't know if that's going to be on the back burner for like refocusing things. But any direction would be appreciated.
do you have time? Because I know you got a full-time job starting.
No, I have time. I can do it, especially like in this week. available and around. So
because there is an area that we have now a new research assistant, but you could also chip on that area. There is we're focusing on looking at China's technology, internal stability and technology, and to see positive and negative aspect of it. I'm making a document. I will send you a link so you can look at it. There's some sources. Would be good to write reports on those sources.
okay.
Yeah, the China white paper is very much on the front burner. We'd like to get it done, within the next several weeks. So
Okay.
that'd be great.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay, so is there any comment from anybody that we haven't discussed? Any issue? Greg, any issue on your side?
No, sounds good.
Sorry, maybe I just wanted to talk a little bit about the presentation on December 5th that I'll be giving here, and
Yes.
see if there's any preferences for format or style or the topics discussed. I know you said it'd be good to limit the presentation about 20 minutes so that we can leave the bulk of the time for kind of discussion and Q&A. But if there's any further directives.
I think our instinct, but see if this makes sense to you, Eduardo, would really be to really start you, give you an introduction, and then let you do 15 or 20 minutes, and then maybe follow up with a question or two, and then open it up to wider Q&A. Does that sound congenial to you?
That's very congenial, yeah. And I've already begun to design it that way. I can speak for about 15 minutes. And then I have two research assistants that, if it's okay with everybody, I'd like them to speak for about 2 or 3 minutes each on a specific example of a program using this type of data. And so in total, it would be under 20 minutes.
That sounds great. No, it'd be nice to have in that case, I think a couple of additional voices would be nice.
Okay, yeah, and in fact, I've also invited some people from Italy that are involved in these topics, and it's okay. I hope if I extended the invitation to two colleagues in Italy. They speak English, of course.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
and in fact, everybody, if you feel like you want to invite anybody, feel free. I'm creating a slide. So slide will be available with a link to registration. So yeah, please, anybody who wants to invite anyone to the event, more than welcome. And Eduardo, always it's helpful if there are aspects of these topic that you think would be good to expand if you provide me with a couple of questions, just in case the audience can ask those questions. So we could pose it and make sure you cover those aspects as well.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll send like a couple bullet points of the main aspects, and I'll probably send you the slides as well beforehand, Pari, so that you can see what the topics are. But one of these colleagues from Italy that I wanted to invite, Pari, is involved in an organization called Data and Democracy. I'll send you a link to their organization because I think in some ways it's similar to what we do with the Global Technopolitics Forum, and it could be a good potential ally when considering reaching out to Europe, since they have a lot of connections at the European Commission and European Parliament.
Sounds very good. Thank you very much.
That sounds good, yeah.
And Eduardo, we usually have a slide deck that most of the time we use it. I'm going to provide you with a link. If you like, you can use that one because it's ready and it's just you need to paste your information in it. So I provide you the link. If you liked it, use it. If you want to use yours, that's fine as well.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so if there is any comment, please go ahead.
I just had a thought or a comment. I don't know if this fits or not, but I was thinking about the focus for the upcoming year, and then once again the connection to China. And I'm wondering, and even the types of discussions that were being talked about. These sort of maybe small format discussions, but in a deeper topic. I was wondering, there's been an increasing pushback against China in some European countries. So if I think about those countries, it's Sweden, for example, Lithuania, and I wonder, and technology certainly plays a role there. And I'm sort of wondering, as does frankly democracy and democratic principles. But I'm just sort of wondering, and I don't think I've seen anything on this, about connecting those dots and saying, looking at those countries and saying, what is it that unites them in their pushback against China? What are their differences, but what unites them? What are the things that they share that are motivating them to push back against China? And how does that influence US strategy and policy in Europe, especially relative to those countries? So that focus to date has been really on Asia. Like, how does the US team up with and work with countries like Korea and Japan, and even a little bit more discussion with Vietnam, for example, about how to face China. But there are countries in Europe that are actually very aggressively doing this, and I haven't seen as much on that, but maybe it's something a little bit more unique to consider. And I haven't seen anyone sort of connecting the dots and saying, okay, we have these individual cases, but how do they fit into some sort of structure here? And what do they share? What are the common motivations, and how does this affect U.S. Geopolitical strategy in Europe, and also related to China?
So that's a really interesting issue. Let me tack on to it. I had a visit on Friday from two Swedish colleagues of mine who were at the Civil Contingencies Agency, very much modeled on the British counterpart, Civil Contingencies Agency. But now they're starting a new agency, which is called the Agency, more or less, Agency for Psychological Defense. And we're testing out on me some of their ideas, their frame, but also very much looking for partners, finding it a little bit hard to figure out which piece of the elephant that is the U.S. government to connect to. But a very interesting work in progress. And they were obviously focused, their three focuses were first Russia, obviously, second China, and then interestingly, third was Iran. So they were worried about all three of those places.
Yes, so are you going to discuss it with them, Greg?
Yeah, so I'll continue to discuss to see what next steps are. They were, at this point, interested in projects we might do, but they were also interested particularly in finding ways to connect. They're pretty well connected at DHS, and that's not a bad place to be connected, but the challenge for these issues, as they are, as we've said over and over again, issues for society. They're not primarily military. They have a military dimension to them, but they're not primarily things for DOD or MOD. So putting the government together on these issues is hard enough for the small countries in Europe. It's almost impossible for us. And but it is the challenge in front of us, it seems to me. And then we've talked a lot in this forum as well about how much of this is really in the private sector, not in the government, and therefore how to reach out in interesting ways, useful ways to the private sector. That's an issue that obviously is very much on my mind.
Greg, does that connect with the topic of cognitive security in any way?
I think it should, don't you? I'm not quite sure how that connection gets made, but it seems to me it should.
Yeah, it's the first time I hear of the term psychological defense, but it reminds me of a lot of things I've been researching for these chapters, because there is a section on cognitive security, and it seems like such a new idea that, as happens when something's so new, a phenomenon so new, is that you have innovation coming from different areas in a way that's kind of difficult to connect the dots. But I wonder, where did you get this term? Because I'd like to research that in a little bit more depth for the upcoming event, December. Psychological defense.
Yeah, that's there. It's I think their translation of the Swedish name for the agency. They were very, as you'd imagine, very interested and careful about language. They realize they're going to have to do most of this in English, right? Because they want to reach out to partners. But they also want to get the language right. And they also want to have words that are, how shall I put it, congenial to their MOD colleagues, right? And to their intelligence colleagues. So they were thinking a lot about what's the right way, even as they got into strategies. How do you think about particular words in that strategy? I think particularly, as you say, Eduardo, given newness of all this, it is really important to be careful about the language.
Thanks for bringing that to my attention. That's really interesting.
If I get any materials from them, I'll send them on to you.
It does sound like one of those things that you can never really get the language right. However,
yes, no, exactly. That's right. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't keep trying, right?
Yeah, right.
Right.
But Greg, if you're looking for proposals, would be wise for us to write with Eduardo a proposal, just a one-page conceptual, to see if they're interested?
Sure. They were on the lookout, and I think they do have money. Not, it's Swedish scale money, not huge money, but so I think we should, yes.
Yeah, so Eduardo, why don't you write a one-page conceptual, and then me and Greg will work on it, and maybe Greg could show to see if there is any interest on that area.
Sure, and I worked with a originally Swedish company called Recorded Future in the past, who I think would if we want to expand to the technical capacity in the sector, might be interested. They're called Recorded Future, and and the founder was in the Swedish military in some capacity at one point, and they're really cutting edge. Recorded Future.
Great, thank you.
And Greg, is this information confidential or is it public about this organization, etc.?
Well, I think it's essentially public. I mean, they're careful about it, but it's so we should treat it as kind of private conversations at this point, but it's not secret for sure.
So we treat it as private at this stage.
Right.
Okay, in this case, Eduardo, if you please write a one-page proposal, I think maybe Greg could show it to them, and if there was an interest, then we can follow it up and expand on it. Any other?
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other comments from anyone?
Very quickly, Pari, I'm just going back to what I said. It will be a very good idea to consider having, amongst everything else, which the forum is going to do in 2022, have maybe a diplomat from India, an academic from Europe, and a senior guy from a think tank in Africa to talk about, maybe an area or an issue like China, for example, or anything else. I think I'll be very happy to get 3 people, one, an Indian diplomat, a very senior diplomat who has spent time in US and Europe and has now retired from the active service. So I'll be happy to come on board and talk. Mm-hmm. Then we could probably get a senior academic from Europe. And finally, a senior guy from one of the leading African think tanks, which is an affiliate of University of South Africa. And I think we could probably weave and therefore taking an agenda, an issue, and also spreading the wings and, reputation and credibility of the forum to Asia, Africa, and Europe almost simultaneously. So please think about it, and if you're fine with it, I'll be very happy to get into the groove and get these people, and then we can probably figure it out how would we really like to go about.
Yeah. Are you talking about webinars in terms of a webinar?
Absolutely. It would be maybe one-on-one or maybe a moderated panel. I mean, we could probably figure out the format of, how we go about doing it. But I think a senior diplomat from India, a senior academic from Europe, and one of the very senior persons working with one of the leading think tanks in Africa. He's based in Pretoria, and I'd be very happy to sort of come around and then we can expand, the footprint of the forum and also put the agenda on the table. Maybe Africa could be an agenda. This is being talked about. Someone in India, someone in Europe, and someone in Africa, and then we could probably follow through. Could be some kind of a small report which could be prepared and that could be put on forum's website, and we also
very good idea. Very good idea. Thank you very much. And in fact, I think start to think about the topic and people. So we could do it. When it's webinar, it's easy. Convenings, it's more difficult. But webinars is easy, and we can start with webinars, and then, eventually we have convenings in a, sometime in future. So it's a very good idea. Thank you very much. And please go ahead and do it. Any other comments from anybody else? No? In this case, I want to thank you everyone for being here and for all your support and feedback. I wish you a wonderful week and
Good week, everybody.
Take care.
Take
Yeah,
care.
happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.